Welcome back. It's me, Mr. Truman, again, and it's a new day and a new lesson. And so for our first little lesson today, we're going to be looking at something called midpoint. And I'm going to take and show you how to calculate the midpoint of a segment. And I'm going to do it in a couple ways. The first way I'm going to do it is I'm going to show you kind of a graphical representation of what's happening by just drawing. And then I'm going to do a bit of showing you how to do it numerically using a formula. But I think it's kind of important that you see how I do this graphically first, and then numerically. You can see how the two things are tied together. Because when I just drop a formula on you without giving you any real, how did we get that formula, it's really hard sometimes for you to figure out what's going on. Like, how am I just supposed to memorize all these formulas? Because you don't have them in context yet that make them really important to you enough to where you can figure out how to use them. So let's just jump in with how to figure out the midpoint of this segment. So what I want to do when I say midpoint is I'm trying to find a halfway point. It's like if I started, if A is where I'm at right now at school and B is where I'm going home, well, I want to find a midpoint. That would be like me trying to find a halfway point. Where am I at when I'm halfway home? All right, so there's a couple things I want to go over, and the first one is I want to show you, when I start drawing, I'm draw a lot of triangles in this lesson, and I'm going to show you why I draw triangles, and it has to do with the way I'm traveling. So if I'm going to go from A to B, it's all about the way I read a graph. I read from left to right. And when you're in algebra class, you always, what's the most important letter? X. What always comes first? X. It always is X, then Y. Well, I'm going to do the same thing here. I'm going to worry about X first. I'm going to find my X values, then I'm going to find my Y values. So if I have to find my X values, let's say I start here, and I got to go across the page to get home. So let's say I'm driving here, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm traveling 7 units in this direction, this way. It's really important that we keep track. Now we read a graph left to right. That's why I'm kind of, again, I'm going across the page. I'm going to go from here to here. Now, next thing, to get my Y value, I need to go 1, 2, 3, 4 units. And I'm going this way. Okay, so traveling from A to B, the midpoint would be located at the halfway of both of these values. So let's think about what's half of 7 units. Well, half of 7 is 3.5 or 3.5. So let's count that out. Remember, this is where I'm at. 1, 2, 3.5. So this marks my halfway going left and right. Now 4, half of 4 is 2, so let's count down, 1, 2, and this represents my halfway for going up and down. Well, if you find out where those 2 points intersect, you are right here. These two things would come together if you drew them out. That is my midpoint. So what I did was I found the halfway point between both sets of values, and then I divided them, or found both sets of values, and then found the halfway point. So let's look at that numerically, what I did. So if you look at from our midpoint, for the first half of the graph, for the -3, that's 3 units. For the second half of the graph, where it's a 4, there's 4 units. So I took the X value from the first one, -3, and that, again, that -3 comes here, and then the 4 comes from right here. And I divided them by 2. So -3 plus 4 is 1, and 1 divided by 2 is 1/2. Okay, when it comes to the other one, well, first off, I took the +2 and the -2, and I added them together. Well, +2 plus -2, when you divide them in 2, well, +2 plus -2 is 0, and if you divide that in 2, you get 1/2, 0. Or if you're using decimals, you could say that's 0.5, 0.5, 0. Either way, same answer. It all depends on how you're being asked to fill out your answer card or answer. All right, so that puts me to the middle. Let's talk about formula. What did I really do when it came to these problems? I took the first X, let's call it X1, and I added it to the second X, I'll call that one X2, and I divided them by 2. Now, for the second part of the problem, I took the first y and I added it to the second y, and I divided it by 2. Now you're wondering, why did I just draw these parentheses on there? Well, that's because when they asked us, they wanted us to ask this question, they wanted to find a midpoint, the halfway point. And when you find a point on a line or a point on a segment, for example, that's a coordinate, that's an exact location called an ordered pair. And therefore, it must have a set of parentheses to designate, hey, that's an ordered pair. Because if I don't put that, it just looks like a list of random numbers. So let's make sure that ordered pair is always going to have that parenthesis on it. So I'm going to put another question up here for you, and I want to figure out what's the best way to attack it. Should we go with the whole drawing it out, or should we just go straight to the formula? Let's see. So now I load it up. Oh, and they've given me just numbers, no graph. Well, if I just have numbers and no graph, I think it's best to probably just go right for the formula. And let's recap that formula. We take the x's, the first x plus the second x, divide them in half. Then we take the first y plus the second y and divide them in half. And we call this midpoint. All right, so let's do those numbers now. Let's start off. For our first x, we can use -2 plus 8 divided by 2. For the second one, we can use 5 plus -12 divided by 2. Keeping those coordinates, those ordered pairs there, keep those parentheses on. Well, -2 plus 8 is 6. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 5 plus -12 is -7. Divided by 2 can be represented as -7/2, or, if acceptable, you could also write -3.5. Sometimes when you're on a computer, they want the answers as decimals. Sometimes they want them as a fraction. Sometimes your teacher wants a decimal. Sometimes your teacher wants a fraction. So either way, these are the two ways that you can represent the answer. If I'm looking down at that bottom example, I see all decimals, I'd go straight for the midpoint formula. And that is how we do midpoint. So I'm going to give a couple problems to you guys to see if you can figure it out. We'll come around and check. All right, thank you.